Hey friends, welcome back to the Happy Homestead. I'm Amanda, and today I'm going to share my love of cast iron skillets with you. How I use them, how I clean them, how I care for them. I think this is so important because our culture, at least probably for the last couple of decades, was so hung up on non-stick pans, which really resulted in these pans that had, in some cases, a Teflon coating, and then certainly in the more recent years, other types of coatings that claimed to be safe and they're still non-stick. I don't know about you, but I just don't want to take those chances. We are on a journey, and we've been on a journey for the last 10 years of just revamping how we live, our lifestyle, how we want our children to live, and not just trusting what we grew up with or what our parents did, that was still the right answer, right? Our parents certainly did the best they could with what they had, but it's our job to do the same, to do the best we can with what we have and what we know. And so I'm here to share with you, cast iron is the way to go. Trust me, it's the way to go. It is a bit of a shift in how you cook. It doesn't mean you change what you cook, but it's a shift in how you cook and certainly the care. And I think that is what intimidates people the most, is how you clean your cast iron skillet, because you do not want to use soap ever. I know that there's some people that will say they use a very light, mild detergent. It's not necessary. So I think that's what intimidates people the most. That intimidated me, quite honestly. And the fact that you always wanted to have it seasoned. What did that mean? What does seasoning mean? I'm gonna break it down for you. All it means is it's got a good level of fat on the pan, and that's what helps create the non-stick surface, really. So I'm gonna film this video over a couple of different days, different types of foods that I'm gonna cook in the skillet, the cast iron skillet, so that you can kind of get an idea of what you can do at home and how you can use it to work for you and your family. So I have two pans. This one is a Lodge, and I purchased this from Amazon, believe it or not, and it came with this handy dandy silicone handle wrapper, coverer. Sometimes when I'm filming, normal words and the correct words just like poof escape my brain. But I use this all the time because it really helps me from having to touch a hot handle, which again, with a cast iron skillet, it gets very hot. You don't want to ever touch it. So I have this Lodge one that I purchased from Amazon. I'll actually link it down below. I love it. I really do. This is my go-to cast iron pan. And then I have this one, which is a little bit deeper. It's probably about the same diameter. And this is a Wagner. So this is an older brand, but a very tried and true brand. I received this one from my father-in-law's mother. So this one has been used for generations. It's one of my prized possessions here in the kitchen because it's one of those things that, if it could only tell the story, right, of all of the things it's been through and seen. But these are the two that I have. I keep them on my stovetop all the time, and it's really just something I'm using multiple times a day. When you buy a cast iron skillet, especially if you're buying one from a store like Amazon or any other local store near you, they're probably gonna say pre-seasoned, which basically means that they've been seasoned with some sort of fat layer. But I would not let that make you too comfortable in thinking you don't need to do anything. So the best advice I can give is that when you're cooking with cast irons, and then when you're even just taking care of it, always use a fat. My go-to is home rendered lard. Now, we render our own lard, and honestly, for the cast iron, this is the big use for it. Occasionally I'll cook with it, but honestly, the lard is the go-to. It is a natural, sustainable fat. You absolutely can also use coconut oil or even an avocado oil, but I would recommend truly the lard if you can get some. So I'm gonna cook in this skillet tonight. I'm gonna sear some steaks and then put it right in the oven to help finish the steaks off. You can kind of already see the sheen on my pan here. So there is some fat here. However, I'm gonna put a little bit more in as the pan gets hot on the stove. And once everything's cooked through, I'll show you how it looks and how we're gonna clean it. I'm gonna turn my burner on medium high. The other trick with using a cast iron skillet is you don't wanna put any food in it until it is super hot. That goes for eggs as well. You really wanna get that good sear, and so having a very hot pan helps with that. I'm using an induction stove because that's what we have, but also the great thing about cast iron is that it works with gas as well. I'm just gonna put a little bit of lard on the bottom there, and then eventually you'll see that start to melt down. My pan's good and hot. I'm gonna start to put the steaks down, and you should hear the sizzle. That is what you want to get that good sear. I just added some Redmond real salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Once I'm happy with the sear on both sides, I'm gonna throw this in a 450-degree oven and cook it the rest of the way through the way I want it. But again, this is not about cooking steak. This is all about the cast iron. So I'll show it to you once I take the steaks off the pan so you can see how it looks. So the pan isn't too bad, but there is some stickiness going on here, and the pan's very hot, so you always want to be very careful. Your first reaction would be to do what I'm doing, which is scrape, but you're gonna take a lot of time and a lot of effort. The trick I have found is just to add some water. You don't need much. And then start scraping away. Now the burner is not on, but the pan is still very hot. And I just go around the edges, making sure I'm getting everything, and then kind of go row by row right there in the middle. Until you start feeling nothing sticking, then you're ready. So we're gonna take this to the sink. Pour the water out. I sometimes rinse as well. Now our pan is clean, we just have to dry it off. So I put it back on the burner. Again, everything is still very hot. Water is the enemy for cast iron. Certainly not in the method we just used to clean it, but if you were to let it sit with water on it, that is when rust occurs. Now you can see the pan looks really good, but I'm gonna go a step further and put a little bit more of the lard on. I literally have this one rag that is used just for my cast iron skillets and nothing else. And I only wash it once every couple of months. You can use this with or do this with a paper towel as well. But I'm basically just gonna rub that fat around. And look, good as new, ready to go for the next use. Just turned the camera on. Marley's missed y'all. He wanted to drink some water. But it's that easy. That literally took maybe 2 minutes from the time I poured the water in to the time I wiped the lard around. That's it. It is the easiest cleanup. Now, probably not the messiest, right? I'll make sure the next one is pretty messy. So that's it for tonight. I'm gonna go enjoy some steak. Good morning, it's the next morning and we're gonna cook some breakfast. So rather than just cooking eggs, which I will do, I'm also gonna cook a hash with like peppers, onions, potatoes, a little bacon fat, and show you how you do that in the cast iron skillet. One other thing I wanted to mention is that you'll see me within this video and in other videos, whenever I'm working on my cast iron, I'm using metal. I am never using plastic, but I am occasionally using wood. So when you're cooking with cast iron, you really want to stick to either like a stainless steel or an all-natural wood type utensil. Plastic, as you can imagine, could very well melt within your cast iron, and then that could get into your food, and that's just a mess you don't want to deal with. So just like before, right, we start with a good fat. Now I usually have a little container next to my stove of bacon fat. Whenever we cook bacon, I save that fat, pour it in there, and I'll use that. But today I actually have a little homemade bacon. It is kind of fatty, but I'm gonna use some pieces of that and start cooking that first in my pan before I add in my sweet potatoes, my peppers, and my onions. Turning the burner on to medium. Now, because I'm doing something so fatty, I don't actually have to wait till it gets hot to start adding my bacon. So I'm just gonna let that sit in the pan, and really it's gonna render down, right, where I'll be able to pour a lot of that fat off into that little jar and let the rest of it cook up. I'm cooking a lot today because this is going to be breakfast for the next 3 days. I like to batch cook my really involved breakfast. It just makes life a little easier. So you can see there's a lot of fat or oil, right, on the bottom of the pan. I am going to pour that out. And continue cooking. All right, so I'm gonna continue to cook this like I would any other day. Add salt, pepper, some herbs. I am gonna put a lid on it to help keep some of that moisture in. When all is said and done, we'll show you the bottom of the pan. So the hash is done, and as you can see, we've got some bits there. Now, I want to cook my egg. So if I were to cook my egg, well, why don't we do it? Let's just put one egg down without doing anything to the pan. I want you to see the difference between cleaning the pan after something like the hash, right, where it kind of creates that residue versus not cleaning it. So I can already tell this is going to be a mess. My egg is not going to come out well because you can just see it's already starting to stick. Yeah. And it's because, right, there's other stuff here. Now, if I had put some fat down on top of this, that would have helped, but I don't think that would have solved the problem. You see how this is a mess now, but that's okay. After we cook this egg, we're gonna clean this and then cook another egg, and you'll see the difference. Not very pretty. Okay, so now our pan is even bigger mess. I'm just gonna turn the burner off temporarily. Add my water. But this time I'm gonna use this brush. I'll link this down below. This is just a brush that I use strictly also for my cast iron pans. Depending on how stuck something is, right? I can use the spatula or this. I find this works a lot better for things that are really stuck. All right, I think we've got it. I'm gonna go dump this out. Wipe it with my rag. Let me get all of that water off. And when you do this, you also wanna make sure you're not leaving any water within the handle, and then obviously on the bottom. Okay, so perfectly clean. I'm just gonna add, a little lard for my egg. Now, I could easily add some of that bacon fat that I just poured off, but it's not as clean, so I'm gonna use this for now. And when I say it's not as clean, right, you can see it. It's not clean. It's got a lot of sediment, so I really want to let this harden up, and then I can kind of use the top part that's clean, but I don't want to get that other stuff. It's basically just some of the seasoning and impurities and whatnot, but all it's going to do is make my pan kind of gunky again. All right, our pan is hot. I'm going to go ahead and drop my egg in. So I want you to look at the edges. It already looks different, right? You can tell it's not entirely caking on. Look at the difference. We're back on our cast iron journey, and today I'm gonna cook some pancakes. So I figured this would be something that maybe you would be a little trepidatious about on cast iron, because that's how I was. Having a nonstick skillet, I kept it for a good 6 months after I decided I was done using it, just as an insurance policy, and really it was for pancakes. Because to me, I just never had good experience doing pancakes on cast iron. It always stuck, it was messy, right? So I thought this would be a really good example on how to show you you can do it. So our pan is clean, right? It's seasoned, it's got some fat on it, but what I like to do with pancakes is actually put a little coconut oil down, lard, olive oil, not so much. Not so much with pancakes. Butter would work. Coconut oil I find is the best option because the butter is prime in this house and I would like to save it for other things. So I'm going to turn the stove onto medium heat, and I'm using my Wagner pan today, starting with a different pan. And I'm just going to add a little bit of coconut oil. Now, I use my hands because coconut oil is also an excellent moisturizer that you can then put on your hands. All right, so we're going to let that melt down. Just like with previous things we're cooking, you really want your pan to get super hot. Now my handle is still very cold, and this is just warm. So we're not gonna put any batter in until we know this is really hot. We don't wanna ever burn our pancakes, right? So pancakes are a little bit different from the other items that we've cooked so far, but having it on a medium-ish heat, now I have it on a 6, I will probably go down to about a 4 at some point as I'm cooking through, get further along in my batches, my pancakes of my batch. But really you wanna start with a really good high heat, but I don't ever go above a 6 or a 7 on my cast iron on my stove. I just never had the need to because it gets so hot. I turned the stove down to a 5. Remember in the very beginning of the video, I had mentioned you don't have to change what you cook, you just change a little bit with how you cook with cast iron. I just don't find I need to put it as high as I would on another pan. So the pan, you can see, is not very dirty. So it's still very hot though. I'm just gonna take my cast iron rag and scoop up any of the crumbs. But also while I do that, I'm spreading more of that coconut oil and that fat around. And look, it just has to cool, but it's ready for the next use. I hope this will convince you to at least try cast iron. Maybe your mom has one, a friend, a neighbor. Try it out, see what you think. And by all means, go to some antique stores and try to find some really old vintage ones. Stay healthy, stay well. Bye-bye.